first principle in the science of getting rich. In understanding the first principle in the science of getting rich, please understand that you are spiritually made in the image and likeness of God. That means that you have the same faculty that the mind of God has. Now, what is that faculty? That faculty is you have the ability to think independent of circumstances. You can right now think independent of anything that has ever happened to you, any worry, doubt, or fear, any circumstance that you think your life may be bogged down in. You can begin to think right now about the possibility of freedom, the possibility of success, the possibility of well-being, the energy of intelligence and love all around you. Even if your circumstance is negative, you have the faculty of God. You can think independent of circumstances and watch your life begin to change. Now, as you develop the power and the commitment to think this way, regardless of the appearances in front of you, you will unleash a power within you that can move mountains and change the course of human history. It all starts with our thought. Let me give you an example of this. A number of years ago, in my spiritual community, we had to move from one building to another building, and we were temporarily using hotel rooms to have services. We were in the process of leasing a building, refurbishing it, keeping staff, using the hotel rooms on the weekends, and we were quickly running out of money. All looked very, very bleak because on paper, it did not look like we had enough money to complete the project in time. I called a meeting of my board of trustees, the contractor who was doing the build-outs in the building that we were now moving in, and I said, is it possible for us to complete this? They said, it doesn't look like it. We don't have the money. We don't have the time. And I put a chair up against the door and I had a board member sit in it. I said, no one is leaving this room until I get an agreement. And I went around to each individual and I said, is it possible what we're trying to do? I didn't ask you how we would do it. I didn't ask you if it was probable. I asked you if it was possible. And we did not leave the room until every single individual said, it's possible. I said, all I need you to do is hold the feeling tone of the possibility. Don't ask how it's going to be done. Just hold the feeling tone of its possibility. And then we went on about our business. That very same week, within 3 days, a bank that we had submitted some loan documents to had the documents. The owner of the bank was looking over the shoulder of the person with our particular file. He asked the man, what are you doing? The man said, I'm working on this loan document from the Agape International Spiritual Community. The owner said, is that Beckwith? He said, yes. To give them the money. He said, sir, but we haven't done our due diligence. They don't have any collateral. He said, give them the money. So within 3 days, we had the money to complete the build-out. The contractor came to my office and said, I was so moved by that meeting, I've decided to pay the workers out of my own money and to put on a crew so that we can work 24 hours a day to get this job finished. So within 3 days, we had the money and we had the crew, and just a few days before, it was impossible. My board changed their way of thinking and allowed possibility to be there. There is a principle. It is the first principle of the science of getting rich. In session number 4, Bob Proctor is going to bring you to it.
As you go through this session, you're going to find that we have literally been programmed to live from the outside in. And this lesson is going to grab your head and turn it right around, and you're going to live from the inside out. Waddell said, thought is the only power that can produce tangible riches from the formless substance. The stuff from which all things are made is a substance which thinks. A thought of form in this substance produces the form. Original substance moves according to its thoughts. Every form and process you see in nature is the visible expression of a thought in the original substance. As it thinks of a form, it takes that form. As it thinks of a motion, it makes that motion. That is the way all things were created. We live in a thought world, and this world is a part of a thought universe. The original thought of a moving universe first extended throughout the formless substance. The thinking stuff resulting from that thought took the form of systems of planets and continues to maintain that form. Thinking substance takes the form of its thought and moves according to the thought. Holding the idea of a circling system of suns and worlds, it took the form of these bodies and moved them accordingly. Although centuries may be required to do the work, by thinking the form of a slow-growing tree, the formless substance produces a tree. In creating, the formless substance seems to move according to the lines of motion it has established. The thought of an oak tree does not cause the instant formation of a full-grown tree, but it does start in motion the forces which will produce the tree along established lines. What we're dealing with when it comes to our world, that's yours and mine, our own personal world, is thinking. We've got to think. And we're finding that the results we're getting are limited to the thoughts that we're thinking. Now, the only thing that's holds you and me back is the awareness of what we're capable of doing. I had a wonderful mentor, Leland Valvanderwall. He used to say, observation is power. Judgment is weakness. We never want to judge another person or another situation. Let's just observe the way it is. And do you know, by working with our consciousness, we can become more and more aware. Like the way to fly airplanes has always been here. The thoughts, or the thought stuff that created the thoughts that built the idea that eventually introduced us to New Kingdom, it was always here. The thought stuff that created the thought that built the idea to build the internet and have email and have all the beautiful conveniences that are very commonly accepted today was always here. We had to develop the awareness for doing that. Waddles pointed out to look upon the appearance of poverty will produce corresponding forms in your own mind. Instead, you must hold to the truth there is no poverty, there is only abundance. So as we get involved in the first principle, what we're really getting involved in is awareness. We want to become aware that everything originates in our own mind first and then materializes in our outside world. My old mentor Val Vanderwall and I worked with these 7 levels of awareness that I'm going to touch on now. You will find them outlined in the text of this particular program. These levels are animal, mass, aspiration, individual, discipline, experience, and mastery. Now we start out with our animalistic consciousness. We end up with mastery. How do we move from this animalistic state to mastery? Well, first of all, let's take a look at what happens when we're operating on an animalistic state. What does the animal do? The animal reacts. It's fight or flight. What a lot of people do, a lot of people react. They see something and they react to it. What does the person do that's mastered their life? They respond to it. See, there's a big difference. React or respond. Now, the reaction, it's fight or flight. On responding, it's stop and think. Think and act. There's an enormous difference. Well, when we move away from this animalistic way of life, what do? Well, we fall into another level that we call mass consciousness, and we just go with the crowd. All you have to do is go into any high-rise building in any city in the world today around lunch hour and watch people come pouring out of offices. You could get trampled if you didn't get out of the way. Why do they do it? Well, it's noon. Everybody goes to eat at noon. You'd say, well, are they hungry? No, but it doesn't matter. They eat. It's noon. The masses live by a clock. They don't live by their thoughts. They're controlled by habit. They're controlled by other people. You'll hear people say, well, they can't all be wrong. I like the way our old Nightingale used to put it. He said, if you see a large mass of people moving in one direction and one or two going in the other direction, and you're not going to be thinking, he said, if you're just going to follow other people, follow the one or two, and you'll probably never make another mistake as long as you live. The masses historically have always gone in the wrong direction. You just join in and away you go. I remember when I was a young guy, there was a group of fellas that I was hanging around with. They said, we're joining the Navy. Are you coming, Bob? And I said, sure. I'd never given any thought to a boat, let alone a ship. Why did I do that? Well, the other kids were doing it. Why did I do that? Well, as a little kid, you're told, go on outside, be like the rest of the kids. The only thing you couldn't be like. You're a unique individual. But we move into this mass consciousness, and we just move along like herded animals. How do we break out of the mass? Well, I can tell you how I broke out of the mass. I started to read. I started to read books that triggered ideas in my mind of a better way of life. And what happened was I aspired to something better than what I had. You see, we've gone from the animal to the mass to aspiration. And you aspire to be more, to have more, to do more than you've already got. How do we break away from this mass consciousness, from just following the crowd? You move into the third level of awareness, and it's called aspiration. And that's when you become aware that something in you wants you to live a fuller life, wants you to live a richer life, wants you to be more than you are, to do more and to have more. And when that aspiration becomes strong enough, we want to break away. But as we go to break away and move into the fourth level, and that is individual consciousness, that's where we want to express our uniqueness as a human being. I'm going to tell you this. The paradigms, the conditioning is trying to pull us back to the mass. We're worried about what they think. We're concerned with what the other people, what would the neighbors think? And we were programmed to do that as a child. So although the idea is there, we aspire to be more than we are, the mass consciousness is trying to pull us back. How do we step into that fourth level and begin to express our uniqueness as a human being? Well, it's coupled with the fifth level, discipline. And discipline is where you give yourself a command and follow it. This is how you break away from the masses. This is how you begin to express your own uniqueness as a human being. This is when you take the aspiration to move ahead and express your uniqueness and do it. You give yourself a command and follow it. Now, when you do that, the sixth level is ready-made for you. You gain the experience, and that's what learning is all about. Learning is when you consciously entertain an idea, you get emotionally involved in the idea, and you act on the idea, and you change the end result. And it's the change in result, the experience of the change in result that came about because you disciplined yourself. You gave yourself a command and follow it. You followed the aspiration to express your uniqueness. That's what the learning is. And it's when you do that, when you step into that sixth area and you keep experiencing greater things, that you move on to the seventh, and then you begin to master what you're doing. And what do we talk about mastering what we're doing? We stop letting the physical world control us, and we begin to control ourselves. We begin to think, and we let our thoughts guide our world. There's a graphic illustration in your workbook that shows you what happens. The winning way is your starting point in any aspect of life should be thought. But that's not where most people start. Most people start with results. They let their present results lodge in their mind, and those present results then takes them to the next stage, which is thought. The present results are what trigger the thoughts. Those thoughts then produce feelings. Feelings produce action, which produce more of the same results. This is a self-fulfilling cycle of doom. The average individual's mind is busily engaged in a hodgepodge of totally unrelated ideas, the like of which you'd have difficulty finding outside of a common encyclopedia. Their mind is being dazzled through their senses. Order, vision, and focus are near impossible because of the mental state they permit themselves to be in during their waking hours. This is the mass thinking. They don't think. It's mental activity, and they've tricked themselves into believing that mental activity is thinking. These people believe themselves to be a physical thing in a world of things. They're clutched by an unseen enemy. The lack and limitation being expressed in their present results have captured their conscious control. They concentrate all their mental energy on the limited supply, thereby creating more of the same. The only thing that can grow, Emerson said, is the thing you give energy to. Now, if you let the starting point in your life be your present results, I can assure you, as certain as it's going to get dark tonight, that you're going to get more of the same results. If you let your present results fill your consciousness, that's going to dictate the thoughts that you think. Those thoughts are going to set up the vibration that we call feeling. Those feelings are going to move you into action, and the action's going to produce more of the same result. Now, how do we break away from this? Well, that, in fact, my friend, is the first principle. And that's what this lesson is all about. You see, an aware person thinks what they want to think regardless of appearance. The starting point is thought. They've checked the results. They see what they got, and they say, that's not what I want. So then they begin to think, and they build the thoughts of the things they want. That causes the feeling. The feeling produces the action produces the result. They then observe the result, and they make whatever adjustments are necessary in their thinking to improve it again. We have to be very calm of mind if we're going to do this properly. We cannot let the outside world control us. You just cannot do it. We say, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Well, there's only one thing to be set free from, and that is ignorance. To think what you want to think is to think truth regardless of appearance. James Allen put it very well. He said, calmness of mind is one of the beautiful jewels of wisdom. It is the result of long and patient effort in self-control. Its presence is an indication of ripened experience and of a more than ordinary knowledge of the laws and operations of thought. You become calm in the measure that you understand yourself as a thought-evolved being. For such knowledge necessitates the understanding of others as the result of thought. And as you develop a right understanding and see more and more clearly the internal relations of things by the actions of cause and effect, you cease to fuss and fume and worry and grieve, and remain poised, steadfast, and serene. Now, the focus of this entire program is awareness. An ignorant person permits the appearance of things to control his or her thoughts. What we want to do is understand that we want to originate thoughts. We don't want to let what's going on outside control our thoughts. Every thought of form held in thinking substance causes the creation of that form, but always, or at least generally, along lines of growth and action already established. If the thought of a house of a certain construction were impressed upon the formless substance, it might not cause the instant formation of that house, but it would cause the turning of creative energies already working in trade and commerce into such channels as to result in the speedily building of the house. And if there were no existing channels through which the creative energy could work, the house would be formed directly from the primal substance, without waiting for the slow processes of the organic and inorganic world. No thought of form can be impressed upon the original substance without causing the creation of that form. You and I are creative beings. We were created in God's image. We were given creative faculties. Now, the fact that most people never understand that, never develop that, is another thing. We're not most people. We are studying. We're beginning to understand this. We start to see that we have higher faculties. A human being is a thinking center and can originate thought. All the forms that a person fashions with his or her hands must first emerge from thought. An individual cannot shape a thing until that same individual has thought that thing. And so far, the human race has confined its efforts wholly to the work of its hands. It has applied manual labor to the world of forms, seeking to change or modify already existing forms. Our human race has never thought of trying to cause the creation of new forms by impressing thought upon the formless substance. When individuals have a thought form, they take the material from the forms of nature and make an image of that form which is in the mind. They have so far made little or no effort to cooperate with the formless intelligence to work with the Father. They have not dreamed that they can do what they seeth the Father doing. Mankind reshapes and modifies existing forms by manual labor. We have not considered the question of whether we could produce things from the formless substance by communicating our thought to it. I propose that we may do so, to prove that any man or woman may do so and show how. My first step will be to lay down 3 fundamental propositions. First, we assert there is one original formless substance from which all things are made. All the seemingly many elements are only different presentations of one element. What does he mean by that? Well, let's look at it this way. I want you to imagine yourself holding a glass of water. What is your hand made of? Your hand is made of energy. It's a mass of molecules and a high speed of vibration. What's the glass made of? Made of energy. What's in the glass? Water. What's the water made of? Energy. Now, you take and boil that water, and it's not called water anymore. It'll be called steam. It's the same energy, just moving at a different speed. What's the glass made from? Energy. It used to be sand. So what we've really done is alter the molecular structure of the energy, and we turn the sand into glass. Still the same formless stuff. Well, you see, where we have a problem is that thought and energy is one. Thought waves are cosmic waves that penetrate all time and space. First, he said, we assert there is one original formless substance, and from which all things are made. Well, where does everything start? It starts in thought. What's thought? Thought's energy. Think of it. Thought waves are cosmic waves that penetrate all time and space. Do you know that thought would make the laser beam look puny? All the seemingly many elements are only different presentations of one element. All the many forms found in organic and inorganic nature are only different shapes made from the same stuff. And this stuff is thinking stuff. A thought held in it produces the form of the thought. Thought in thinking substance produces shapes. A human being is a thinking center, capable of original thought. Do you know that the one point all great leaders have agreed on, they've disagreed on virtually everything else, is that you and I become what we think about? That was the foundation of Earl Nightingale's strangest secret record. First recording that outside of the entertainment industry that sold over 1 million copies. And if you haven't listened to it, I'd suggest you go to the Nightingale Conant Corporation and buy it. It's incredible. 40 minutes of the best philosophy you're ever going to hear. And they're saying the same thing here. Thought in substance produces shapes. A human being is a thinking center, capable of original thought. That means you are a thinking center. You're the center of thought. Thought's omnipresent. Thought energy's everywhere. And this energy flows into your consciousness and you can think anything you want to think. Isn't that nice? And thought is the preamble to everything. Do you want to live a richer life? Start to think of a richer life. Do you want to live in a healthier body? Start thinking of a healthier body. Do you want to have more meaningful relationships? Start thinking of more meaningful relationships. If any one of us can communicate our thought to original substance, we can cause the creation or formation of the thing we think about. That's a huge idea. That's essentially what I did almost a half a century ago. Here I was broke, I was unhappy, I was sick. And I met a man that provoked me to look at that, look at the results I was getting, and he got me to admit I don't like these results. He said, quit thinking about those results. Start to think of what you want. Now let me just share part of the syllabus of this with you from Waddles. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces a thing that is imaged by the thought. You can form things in your thought, and by impressing your thought upon formless substance, can cause the thing you think about to be created. I love that. I just absolutely love it. I can prove these statements by both logic and experience. Reasoning back from the phenomena of form and thought, I come to one original thinking substance. And reasoning forward from this thinking substance, I come to the individual's power to cause the formation of the thing one thinks about. Don't just treat this as something you're listening to. Really think about what you're hearing. That's how everything happens. Where do you think the garments that you have on your back right now came from? Somebody thought them. We call them designers. And then we made them. Where do you think your automobile came from? Someone thought about it. Henry Ford built the first V8 engine. He called his engineers in and told them to build it. They went away and come back and said it can't be done. Now, he was the guy that was signing the check. He said, go away and do it. They come back about 6 months later and said it can't be done. He said, go away and do it. Henry Ford had an innate awareness. If he could see it in his mind, he could do it. He understood the secret. That's what the secret is. If you can build the image in your mind and hold it, you will attract all that's required for the manifestation of it. Now, by experiment, I find this reasoning to be true. And this is my strongest proof. If one person using this program gets rich by doing what you're hearing, that is evidence in support of my claim. Well, I've done that. I've done exactly what Wallace Waddles said, and I'm earning millions of dollars. Here's a guy, no formal education, no business experience, but he's earning millions of dollars. How? Doing what I'm sharing with you here. Furthermore, if every person who does what I say to do gets rich, that is positive proof until someone goes through the process and fails. The theory is true until the process fails. And this process will not fail because every person who does exactly what I say to do will get rich. I have said that an individual gets rich by doing things in a certain way. In order to do so, you must become able to think in a certain way. Your way of doing things is the direct result of the way you think about things. To do things in a way you want to do them, you will have to acquire the ability to think the way you want to think. This is the first step toward getting rich. To think what you want to think is to think truth regardless of appearances. You could very easily skip over that. I don't want you to. I want you to really mentally play with what I've just said. To do things in a way you want to do them, you will have to acquire the ability to think the way you want to think. In other words, if you want to live an opulent lifestyle, you're going to have to think that way. If you want to earn many times what you're earning without working hard, you're going to have to think that way. And you see, this is the first step toward getting rich. To think what you want to think is to think truth regardless of appearances. What Waddles is really saying is quit letting your physical world control your higher world. Do you know, if you were working with electricity, you always work from a higher to a lower potential. You never work the other way. Why is it in life we work from a lower to a higher potential? Well, if you think about it for a while, it'll become obvious. We've been programmed to do that. As little kids, the parent will say, will you listen to what I'm telling you? Will you look at this? Always the attention is brought to bear on the outside world, never on the inside world. If we would quietly move towards the little person and say, what do you see in your mind? What are you looking at? And encourage them to talk to you about the pictures that are going on in their mind, they would live in a much different world. Now let's go back to Wallace Waddles' words. He said, you have the natural and inherent power to think what you want to think. but it requires far more effort to do so than it does to think the thoughts which are suggested by appearances. To think according to appearances is easy. To think truth regardless of appearances is laborious and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work you have to perform. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose you're in sales, and your previous month's sales were all fairly low. Are you going to let your previous results control your thinking about what's going to happen this month? Or are you going to originate new thoughts? Let's take a look at the bank account. The bank account is very low. Do you let the bank account dictate your state of wealth, or are you going to think your own thoughts? Wattles went on to say there is no labor from which most people shrink as they do from that of sustained and consecutive thought. It is the hardest work in the world. Do you know, Earl Nightingale was an absolutely brilliant man. He was my boss, my mentor. I worked with Earl for 5 years. He used to say if most people said what they were thinking, they would be speechless. And people would laugh at that. They'd say, well, everybody thinks. Everybody does not think. Most people do not think. Mental activity does not constitute thinking. Dr. Ken McFarland said 2% of the people think, 3% think they think, and he said 95% would rather die than think. Thinking is the hardest work there is, which is the probable reason so few people engage in it. Now permit me to repeat what Waddle said. He said there is no labor from which most people shrink as they do from that of sustained and consecutive thought. It is the hardest work in the world. This is especially true when truth is contrary to appearances. Every appearance in the visible world tends to produce a corresponding form in the mind which observes it. This can only be prevented by holding the thought of the truth. If your bank account is very low, let's say there's only $1,000 in it, and it's the 15th of the month, and by the end of the month you have to have $15,000. Are you going to let the $1,000 dictate the image you're holding of your bank account in your mind? Or are you going to hold the thought of the truth, the $15,000? You've got to determine who's in control. Is the bank account in control of your thinking, or is your thinking in charge of your bank account? Now, Waddle said to look upon the appearance of disease will produce the form of disease in your own mind and ultimately in your body. Instead, you must hold the thought of the truth, which is there is no disease. Disease is only an appearance. The reality is health. To look upon the appearances of poverty will produce corresponding forms in your own mind. Instead, you must hold to the truth that there is no poverty. There is only abundance. It requires power to think health when surrounded by the appearance of disease, or to think riches when in the midst of the appearances of poverty. But when you acquire this power, you become a mastermind. You can conquer fate, and you can have what you want. You might want to mentally go back to those 7 levels of awareness. Now, this power can only be acquired by getting hold of the basic fact which is behind all appearances, that there is one thinking substance from which and by which all things are made. Then we must grasp the truth that every thought held in this substance becomes a form, and that a person can impress thoughts upon it so as to cause them to take form and become visible things. When we realize this, we lose all doubt and fear because we know that we can create what we want to create. We can get what we want to have and can become what we want to be. As a first step toward getting rich, we must believe the 3 fundamental statements given previously in this particular lesson. In order to emphasize them, I want to repeat them here. Now, this is part of Waddle's syllabus. He said there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces a thing that is imaged by the thought. You can form things in your thought, and by impressing thought upon formless substance, you can cause the thing you think about to be created. I absolutely love the syllabus. I really do. I'm going to repeat it. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces a thing that is imaged by the thought. You can form things in your thought, and by impressing thought upon formless substance, you can cause the thing you think about to be created. You can visualize a relationship in your mind that you don't now have. You can build the thoughts. I guarantee you that relationship will walk right into your life. You can see abundance. You can see wealth in your mind. And I guarantee you it will walk right into your life. Everything you want, you can visualize your company being the way you want it to be. Give those thoughts to the universe. It will move into form. Waddle said you must lay aside all other concepts of the universe than this monistic one. You must dwell upon this until it is fixed in your mind and has become your habitual thought. Read these creed statements over and over again. Fix every word upon your memory and meditate upon them until you firmly believe what they say. If a doubt comes to you, cast it aside as a sin. Do not listen to arguments against this idea. Do not go to churches or lectures where a contrary concept of things is taught or preached. Do not read magazines or books which teach a different idea. If you get mixed up in your faith, all of your efforts will be in vain. Do not ask why these things are true, nor speculate on how they can be true. Simply take them on trust. The science of getting rich begins with the absolute acceptance of this faith. You know, the truth is that all religions teach this. Every religion teach you that you are created in God's image, you've been given creative faculties, and you're capable of doing great work. Allow me to share the questions with you that come with this segment of the program. Here's the first one. What is the first step toward getting rich? That's an interesting question, isn't it? What is the first step toward getting rich? Here's the second one. What is mankind and what power have we? Now that could keep you thinking for 20 years. Now here's the third. It's a question and a comment, really, or a suggestion. I want you to repeat the summary that I read to you of Waddle's that I said I was so familiar with. I'll read it one more time. He said, there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces a thing that is imaged by the thought. You can form things in your thought, and by impressing thought upon formless substance, you can cause the thing you think about to be created. Memorize that. Repeat it often. Now let me ask you, do you understand it? Do you believe it? How can it be proved? They're interesting questions. Do you understand it? Do you believe it? How can it be proved? Now here's another one. What is the basic fact behind all appearances? These questions are quite important. You might want to discuss them with a business associate or a loved one. Here's the fifth question. What must you do and what must you believe if you are to practice the science of getting rich? I love that. I'm going to repeat it for you. What must you do and what must you believe if you are to practice the science of getting rich? And number 6. What requires the expenditure of more power than any other work a person has to perform? And here's the last, why? Go back and study the 7 levels of awareness. Really pay attention to them. And understand this. Everything you will ever want is already here. You simply must become aware of its presence. And as you do, you're going to attract it into your life. Remember, you do not get rich by doing certain things. You get rich by doing things in a certain way. And the starting point of everything in your life must be thought. Not results, but thought. That's the starting point. Now, to bring this lesson to a close, let's think about it. The first principle in the science of getting rich. Getting rich is the result of doing things in a certain way. Waddell's syllabus is a beauty. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces a thing that is imaged by the thought. You can form things in your thought, and by impressing your thought upon formless substance, you can cause the thing you think about to be created. I want to suggest at this point, in the secret science of getting rich, that you sit down and ask yourself, how do you feel about this syllabus? How do you feel about what Mr. Waddles is sharing with us? I'm going to ask you to write that out. Make a written declaration about how you feel about this so far. And then look forward to the rest of the program. This is Bob Proctor, and thank you.
Hello, this is Jack Canfield. As we all listen to Bob Proctor cover the first principle in the secret science of getting rich, it's pretty obvious that he feels it's one of the most important lessons in setting up an attractive force for good in our lives. And I agree with him 100%. I feel very fortunate that I learned this lesson as a very young man from my mentor, W. Clement Stone. And I have not only been rewarded with great wealth, but through the proper use of this lesson, I have created abundance in all areas of my life. Fabulous friends like Bob Proctor and Michael Beckwith, Rhonda Byrne and Mark Victor Hansen, Lisa Nichols and John Gray, and so many others. I've created fabulous health, great vacations, incredible kids, and never-ending opportunities to contribute and make a huge difference in the world. To quote Wallace Waddles, an individual gets rich by doing things in a certain way. In order to do so, a person must become able to think in a certain way. A person's way of doing things is the direct result of the way he thinks about things. To do things in the way you want to do them, you have to acquire the ability to think of what you want to think about. This is the first step toward getting rich, my friends. Now, Wallace Waddles goes on to point out this. He says, you have the natural and inherent power to think what you want to think, but it requires more effort to do so than to think the thoughts that are suggested by appearances. You see, it's easy to think about the way things are. All you have to do is observe them. But it takes focus, intention, and concentration to think about the things the way you want them to be. You see, what Waddles is saying here is that when you think according to what you see around you, the current appearance of things, what you see as your results right now, it's easy to keep thinking that way. I mean, how in the world do you expect to get yourself out of this current result? You don't know how it's going to change, so how can you think of it actually happening? It's true. Thinking your way out of your current result does take work. In fact, Wallace Waddles said the same thing when he wrote, "To think truth regardless of appearance is laborious and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work a person has to perform. But the key is, it can be done, and you can learn to do it." As a child, you were probably programmed in much the same way I was, as we all were. Although this programming started when we were babies, Bob mentioned earlier, receiving report cards in elementary school is a great example that's pretty universal to all of us. We were trained to look at the grades on our report card rather than focus on the image of the grade we desired. We learned to let our results control our thinking instead of the other way around. We learned to talk about ourselves as an A student or a B student or a C student. We described ourselves by our past results rather than by our future intentions. See, because our thinking only and always controls our results, we need to be focused on and thinking about different results than we currently have. Our focus needs to be on our ideal future, not our past results. With the help of my dedicated staff, I've built an organization that operates all over the world. We've published books in 47 languages and conducted seminars in over 30 countries. But I want you to clearly understand that I've actually built my company twice. First in my mind, and then in the material world. I've spent hundreds of hours visualizing what Walt Disney called Imagineering my ideal company. And we're still doing that today. And we're never going to stop because we want to keep becoming successful throughout our entire careers. Remember, regardless of what may be going on in your life, I'd suggest that you take the time to build a very clear image of the life you want. First, write it down on paper, every aspect of it: financial, career, health and fitness, your relationships, the travel you want, the hobbies you'd like to engage in, all the achievements you want to have, and the contribution you want to make, the legacy you want to leave. And then hold that image. Focus on it daily. Take the time to paint the image in your mind. Paint the image with words on a sheet of paper first, and then write about it in detail, change it, keep working on it until you get it exactly the way you want it, your ideal life. And then picture yourself in all the different scenarios, enjoying the results in your life. I want you to do this at least once each day for a full month. As William James said, you are depositing this image in the treasury of your subconscious mind. And when that happens, it will attract itself into your reality. Let me tell you why it's so important to do this every day for 30 days. There's some very powerful scientific research behind all of this. The scientists at NASA, the National Aeronautic and Space Agency, in an attempt to discover how a group of astronauts would respond to the kind of disorientation they would experience in outer space, had a group of 10 astronauts in training wear concave lens goggles for 30 days. They had to wear them 24 hours a day, even when they were sleeping and showering. Now, these concave lens goggles make the world appear upside down. Can you imagine how difficult it is to try to function when everything in your field of vision appears upside down and backwards? If you were trying to shake my hand, you'd be reaching up to the right instead of straight out to the left. What they were trying to do was see how they would react during these long periods of disorientation, similar to how they would be dealing with weightlessness in outer space. Would they become irritable, hostile? Would they lose their appetites, become nauseous? Would they lose sleep? Well, the greatest discovery of this experiment was something nobody had expected or predicted. Somewhere between the 25th and 30th day, every single astronaut's brain flipped this upside-down image right side up again. Their brains had actually created new neural pathways so that they could operate more effectively. Now, this was an astounding discovery. And here's the kicker. In a subsequent experiment, they took another group of astronauts and repeated the experiment, but with one change. On day 15, they had half of them take their concave lens goggles off for one day and then put them back on again. And for these astronauts, it took another 25 to 30 days before their brains flipped the image right side up again. This experiment led to what some neuroscientists call the 30-day principle. It takes 30 days in a row to rewire the brain, to change an old habit of thought, to change a belief, or to install a new pattern of behavior, to reprogram the reticular activating system in your brain. This is why you absolutely must use your will, exercise your discipline to picture what you do want instead of focusing on what you don't want for 30 consecutive days without interruption. This discipline of thinking about, talking about, and visualizing what you want is so important. And as Wallace Wattles, Bob, and I have taught, it must be done consistently. This very powerfully demonstrates the transformative power of visualization. As if you needed any more proof after all of that, I'm going to give you one more anyway. Self-made oil millionaire Patrick Taylor of New Orleans also understood this principle. He used it to make millions finding and drilling oil in the Gulf of Mexico off of Louisiana. But what has made education history is his experiment in an inner-city middle school in New Orleans. Patrick adopted a class of kids in the 6th grade, and he told them if they got a B average, had a 96% attendance rate, and didn't get arrested for breaking the law, he'd pay for their college education. Remember, these were kids in a school where the average rate of graduation for kids in that school, graduating high school, was just 16%. That's an 84% dropout rate. Now, that promise alone of him paying for their education would not have been enough to create a major change, because without a further intervention, this promise would soon have been forgotten. But Patrick Taylor understood the principles Wallace Wattles is teaching us in the science of getting rich. And so he put all of the kids in a bus and took them to a local university and had them shadow a student for a day. But Patrick Taylor understood the principles Wallace Wattles is teaching us in this program, the secret science of getting rich. And so he put all the kids on a bus and took them to a local university and had them shadow a college student for a day. For you see, these kids had no real image of what it was to go to college, no clear, indelible picture to refer to. Their parents hadn't been to college. They had never visited their brothers and sisters on a college campus. So Patrick Taylor had them each shadow a college student for a day. They went to their classes, they went to the library, the science labs, to the cafeteria, to the student union, and everywhere else. But again, if only done for one day, this too would have soon faded as a distant memory. But here was the ingenious application of what you were learning from Wallace Wattles and Bob Proctor. Every single day for the next 4 years, the students were asked to close their eyes and visualize going to college. Every day for 4 years. And guess what? Without any other interventions in that school, they didn't change the reading program, they didn't change the teaching style. Simply by doing the visualization, 86% of those kids graduated high school and went on to college. They had a clear image they believed in, a future they could vividly picture in their mind's eye. It was conceivable, believable, and through the daily discipline of visualization, it became achievable. The dropout rate was totally reversed from 86% to 14%. That's the power of the tool that you're being given in this program. So remember, visualize every aspect of your ideal life in as great a detail as you can every single day for a minimum of 30 days. And then keep on doing it until you get the result.